Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new episode of Spill Your Beans. Today we are back with another trilogy review. We haven't done one of these in ages. It might even be, since the MCU Part 2 one, episode 14. But today, episode 18, we're returning to Star Wars with the wonderful Cooper Britton.
Of course. Who else?
Hello. Yeah, who else?
Hello.
Who else? You were in episode 2 of this podcast, the very, very start of this. We recorded that, I think, before I even had the podcast launched, so it was a very different time, and we talked about the prequel trilogy for Star Wars, and sort of talked about that. So if you haven't already listened to that, guys, go and do it. It's a lot of fun there as well. But today we're going to be talking about the originals, the original 3, the renowned ones for being, the best, the original, the best, in some cases. So I'm sure we'll talk about that in due course. But yeah, so for those who maybe didn't catch the first one, what does Star Wars mean to you, Cooper? What kind of got you into it?
It's as sad as it is that it was actually Force Awakens that got me into Star Wars.
Boo! I remember this last time. I remember booing you then as well. Shame on you,
because
Cooper.
I've always like watched it. Like I watched Clone Wars when I was a kid and everything.
Yeah.
But like, what properly got me into it, and I watched all the films when I was a kid, obviously. But what properly got me into it and got me into the lore and to watch everything else and play all the games was The Force Awakens. And I don't know, I just enjoy it. Like, I enjoy watching the films. I'm very passionate about it. Like, I like the extended lore, and I think the characters in some circumstances are written very well, and that's kind of what I get attached to.
I think it has a lot going for it, and I think, like, especially, I remember at the time, even looking at the trailer for Force Awakens, I still get excited, even if I'm not a huge fan of the film. I'm sure we'll talk about that in the next season of this podcast, whenever we get round to the sequel trilogy. But I'm sure there'll be a lot to talk about there. But with The Force Awakens, it's a weird one. But it is a great one, because that time when that came out, it was so exciting. It was like Star Wars is back, and it's like bigger than ever, and it's just, everyone's talking about it, everyone's thinking about it, everyone's thinking about buying a toy lightsaber just for a laugh.
Of course. So I did, so I can't say
we all did. We all did. But yeah, no. When did you get around to watching the originals? Like when you were a kid?
When I was a kid, yeah.
Did they have a sort of lasting impact on you then?
Yes, because I feel like it was what I don't know what order I watched them in, but I think because obviously like stuff like Clone Wars and stuff was like on like Cartoon Network, which I watched as a kid, and it was eventually on like Disney XD or whatever it was. But I think I remember watching the originals and then not having like a massive impact on me. Like, yeah, they're amazing films, but then watching Clone Wars and then going back to them, they had more of an impact, if that made sense.
Yeah, I feel like as well, because Clone Wars and like where the time where we grew up, sort of the early 2000s, like it was like prequel fever, really, wasn't it? I mean, there was not really, even though it was kind of dog shit in terms of the films, and the Clone Wars took a while to really get good. It's that sort of culture we grew up in. I never really watched the Clone Wars until like a couple of years ago, and even then, looking at it, it's like I still remember being more attached to the prequels. Maybe it's to do with the Lego games as well.
It's weird because out of the 3 like trilogies, the originals are what I feel least attached to.
Yeah,
but I think a weird way, because it's like it's out of our time. Like so our time was more like the prequels and obviously Clone Wars and stuff like that. And the reason I feel attached to the sequels is because that's kind of what got me properly into Star Wars, and obviously like all the stuff that's come out more recently.
I think the originals are better films, and I think we'll talk about that.
Without a doubt,
I mean, there's no doubt about like
without
that. But I think when you're a kid and you get introduced to Star Wars, for me, I watched them in episode order. That's the way my dad did it. He was like, right, you can watch episode 1 first, which is a great way to induce a kid, isn't it? Going, oh, here you go, 3-year-old George, watch The Phantom Menace. Oh, but I loved it as a kid because I had the Lego game to go along with it, and I had all the toys and action figures, and that was something in my brain was, oh my god, because that's all the stuff that was out. Even though the Lego game covered the original trilogy, it was kind of like, the actual storytelling aspect was lost on me because, in fairness, I was like 5 years old.
Yeah. I did it in 4, 5, and 6, and then 1, 2, 3.
Really?
That's because obviously my dad being a director and working in film and stuff, he sees them as the better. He was like, "You're going to watch these ones because these are the better films." So like, he wanted me to watch obviously New Hope and Empire because they're just Empire's renowned, and so that's why the reason I did it.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think when I was a kid watching in that order, the whole thing, we'll get to Empire, of course, and the famous ending and twist, and it's one of the most famous pieces of cinema history.
Yeah.
I didn't give a shit when I was a kid because I was like, yeah, I already
no.
know, I already know that. Like, I've just seen this guy grow up. I know he's Darth Vader. Like, I know, I get that. So it's an interesting like aspect to sort of look at it from our generation, but I think they still have a lasting impact, and I think or at least I'll speak for myself here, but I'm sure you share the sentiment where when we've grown up and we've sort of, still been a fan of Star Wars, the original trilogy starts to glow more and more as this like just phenomenal piece of filmmaking and just how it's cemented itself.
Yeah, it is. It's the groundwork. It's literally the base layer of Star Wars.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's everything is set around it. Like literally everything.
Yeah,
it is just the fundamentals.
And I think we'll go into into A New Hope now, or Star Wars originally, before it was eventually renamed A New Hope. I think is an excellent film, and not only an excellent film, but I think he's one of the best Star Wars films. A lot of people obviously go for Empire now, and we're going to talk about this because I don't necessarily think New Hope's better than Empire, but I think it is a fascinating piece of cinema. It really is. Because it's, for me, when I rewatch it, it's one of those ones that I did a Star Wars marathon last year. I'm sure I talked about this in the previous podcast episode we did on Star Wars, where I started with the prequels, watched Clone Wars in order for the first time, Rebels, Rogue One. So by the time we got to the original trilogy, obviously there's been so much content that I've just consumed before I even get to that point. However, it has to be said that watching A New Hope it made me appreciate everything so much more. It's not only a film that works within the context of a universe that's been expanded on it for 40 years since, but it's also a film that works in itself. It's like, it doesn't feel, if you want to watch it with the mindset of, oh, it's got all these connections, like Ahsoka's doing this, Darth Maul's doing this at this moment. Well, Darth Maul's not doing much at that moment, but to have that, but then you can also watch it and be like, this is it. This is the only universe. The planet's explored. That's it. You get references to like wider things and stuff like the Clone Wars and Luke's heritage. But the one thing I really adore about this film is it is just its own film. You can tell when they made this that they were not sure that they were going to get to make more. This was George Lucas's Flash Gordon attempt, just there, and it's beautiful for what it is. Yeah,
it's I don't know. It's just every single because I usually I probably won't do it this year, but most Christmases I will watch all of them, like 1 through 9, whatever. I'll watch all like the episode ones, and I don't know what it is, but it's just A New Hope. Just you can't not enjoy watching it. Like even if you aren't a fan of Star Wars or anything, it's just an absolutely outstanding film. Like you can't. Obviously, it does have its faults, and all films have their faults. But
but for the time,
for the time, like. You literally can't, like, you will enjoy it. It's just crazy like that.
But you look at stuff like the budget and, like, the way it was put together and why it was put together, like, the reason behind why George Lucas even made it, like, because he wanted to get the rights for Flash Gordon but couldn't, that sort of thing. It's just an incredible, like, story about how it was even made, and the fact that it's become such a fantastic thing. And I think generally even the renaming and doing the prequels in a way was a stroke of genius, because I love watching hours and hours and hours and hours of media to get to the first film. And then getting to watch it and be like, wow, this is how it started, but I've already watched so much content. I love that.
Even the behind the scenes, like the techniques that they used, and they were they were relatively new for the time, which it just shows like some of with the budget as well, the techniques that they had to use. It's amazing.
And that's something we will praise this for, is the obviously in the prequel trilogy is a lot of CGI. A lot of CGI. And although we're never really going to see an official release of the original cut of New Hope, Empire, Return, we have to stick with the special editions with added CGI and which we may as well talk about, because this always grates me. The worst, actually, I think, with The New Hope, I think it actually gets better with Empire and Return. Not the CGI, it always sticks out, but they use less of it, I think. Actually, maybe Return of the Jedi, replacing that whole Jabba's palace. Well, not even, horrible. We'll get to that. But A New Hope, I think, it's such a shame, because I most recently watched it on 4K, which I would absolutely recommend if yourself or anyone listening can get a hold of a 4K copy. They're going like quite like around at the moment, but if you get the opportunity to experience the original trilogy on 4K, do it. It's the best way to watch it. It shows up a lot. Like when they're in space, you can kind of make out the lines around like the corner of the individual frames of the ships that have clearly been layered on top of the space scene.
Yeah.
But I love it. I love it as someone who like is fascinated with filmmaking and loves the industry and is so fascinated by this as a piece of cinema, opposed to it being part of like a small cog in a big machine.
Yeah.
As its own film, and it's the only Star Wars film I can ever say as its own film works in that sort of weird way, but I love it. But what I will say is the CGI from the special editions, which is still in there, is showing up even more, because you can upgrade film, you can take the classic look and you can refine it and make it look incredible by modern day standards. The one thing you cannot do is fix shit CGI. And the 4K versions of the original trilogy prove that better than any other film, TV show, piece of media I've ever seen. Shit CGI can never be improved, no matter how decent it might be at the time. Fuck.
Yeah.
It's awful.
Yes.
It's absolutely ridiculous.
It's terrible. It's it's not ideal, really.
Yeah, no. Have you ever encountered the despecialized editions?
I've never.
Because they don't exist in 4K, which is the downside.
Yeah.
But they are on Blu-ray, and you can get them online legally, so long as you actually own the original, or like as long as you have a Disney Plus subscription, or you own them on Blu-ray. And you can find them pretty easily, and they're excellent.
Yeah, I think I remember you saying a little while ago. I remember us having a conversation about them. I think you just got them and watched them.
I don't know if it's the definitive way to watch it. I don't know if I'd say that, but I think if you're gonna rewatch it and you're a big fan of Star Wars and you've never seen them, it's worth a punt. Like, it's still HD. It's been very painstakingly fixed up to be a HD widescreen version of the very original cut of Star Wars, where it's not even stuff like the title card and all that sort of thing. All the CGI is gone. Daft little things that are added in, especially stuff in Empire and Return of the Jedi. I've never actually seen Return of the Jedi despecialized, but obviously I'd like to see the Jabba's palace scene without all that mess in the middle of it.
Yes,
that would be ideal. Yeah. But yeah, no, as a story, A New Hope introduces lots of fascinating characters and concepts and worlds, and I think obviously one of the best heroes and villains and even just side characters of all time. I mean, Darth Vader will start with, introduced in this film, of course, for the very first time in cinema. What a presence, you know what I mean? It never gets old.
Literally a staple villain across all of cinema history.
Yeah.
It's crazy to think, even if you speak to a kid 3-4 years old, and you get him to name some villains, Darth Vader will 90% of the chance be on there.
Oh, 100%. Thanos now crazy. As well, probably.
Yeah, Thanos now as well.
But no, Darth
Vader's one of those staples.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I
think it's one of those ones where he's instantly recognizable, but not even by looks. I think anyone who hears that breathing, you know exactly what it is. You don't even need to question. Even if you've never seen Star Wars, you're like, that's Darth Vader. You know
that's the other thing. Even people who haven't seen Star Wars or know barely anything about the franchise, everyone knows Darth Vader.
Yeah,
everyone.
It is fascinating, and it's a great inclusion, and especially as an introduction, it's a fantastic way to introduce the character. Bringing him in this sort of way. You introduce the stormtroopers; they're quite an imposing force.
Yeah,
the smoke dissipates and Darth Vader enters the room, and it is just brilliant. And again, credit to James Earl Jones, who's still kicking about nowadays, who is absolutely phenomenal as the voice of Darth Vader. Always has been, always bloody will be. And he's in his 90s now, and I think he's still. He's in Rogue One, I think. He still does the voice every now and then.
Yeah, he does still do the voice. Yeah,
which is just incredible,
shows, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
It just shows.
On the mention of Rogue One, How do you think this film sort of works when watched sort of alongside Rogue One? Because we've not actually discussed Rogue One in these podcasts. I'm sure we'll probably get around to it eventually, but where do you sort of feel with that?
I like it. When Rogue One first came out, I wasn't too keen on the idea. Obviously, because at the time we were like, well, I was like, no Jedi, bad Star Wars film, but like, then by the end of it, by the end of watching it and seeing how it perfectly leads in to New Hope, I really like it. I've never watched them back to back, but I would like to, and I do like. I like that they did that.
Yeah, I've done it once, and it's fantastic. It works perfectly, and I think it's one of those ones where it's like the whole no Jedi thing, but I think it perfectly encapsulates the spirit and the idea of Star Wars, and also it plays on the nostalgia of other things as well. Especially after you've watched Rebels, there's even more to watch in there. You know, there's like references to that, and I think that in itself is fantastic. But the way it ties into A New Hope, and again, like watching it, I think that's the thing about New Hope is that it constantly evolves. Even though it doesn't get touched. Yeah. It's, other than the 90s, of course. It's sort of... it's a fantastic film in its own right. But it's a fantastic part of a trilogy. And then it's a fantastic sequel to Rogue One because it follows on perfectly. It's a fantastic... It gets stuff built onto it because of the TV shows and other stuff. And I think it just makes it so much better and more enjoyable. You can go into this film with so many different eyes and get a totally different experience out of it. Yeah. And I think that's the most powerful thing about this film. Not only was it the beginning of one of the most iconic franchises of all time, but I think it really stands apart with how many times you can watch it with different interpretations and different viewpoints from its own franchise.
Mm-hmm. Like you said, even like literally any angle that you watch the film from, whether you just want to watch that film because it's a very good film, whether you want to just watch the original trilogy, whether you're a massive Star Wars fan and you watch everything, whether you watch Rebels and then you want to watch it, whether you watch Rogue One and then you watch it, no matter where you go into, it is amazing. It is an amazing film. Like, yes, if you watch some of the other stuff, you'll get more out of it, but you don't have to. By itself, it's an absolute staple, and it's the beginning of literally everything for Star Wars. Yeah, and it's an absolutely solid groundwork for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, as a story, we've not really delved into it too much, but it has so many fantastical concepts. I don't really want to dwell on the I think because if I address these films as a sort of standard film review, everyone's going to be like, yeah, we've already heard this. Like, everyone's talked about Star Wars, everyone knows it. But I think as just, it's a fantastic piece of work, without having to break down all its story elements and tell you why it's good. It just is. It might not be Empire. It might not be the most dramatically efficient, but what I really love about this film is it is the classic it's the classic hero's tale. It takes inspiration from the classic works of stuff like Flash Gordon in the sort of cheesy sci-fi kind of way, but as well as other stuff like probably some Shakespeare stuff in there, to be quite honest with you. It's the way it brings together lots of elements of history as well as pop culture. I think is fascinating, mixing the sci-fi with your samurai. You got your pilots in there, so you got a little bit of like, I don't know if Top Gun probably wasn't out at the time, but that's sort of I'm trying to think of the right word.
The kind of like I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, kind of like like the piloty kind of action pilot kind of films or TV shows,
jet fighters and all that sort of thing. Those sort of even early sort of 1900s, any sort of action kind of films that it's stuff like King Kong with its flying planes around. It's like you've got those elements in there. It brings in together again like stuff like the samurai, which I think is fascinating. It also incorporates its own like Western point of view in certain aspects as well, which is obviously explored and delved into more in the Mandalorian. But I think it's a really brilliant start, and I think it's a great film, and I hate saying anything negative about it, as you can probably tell by this podcast. But I really don't. I think it is in some aspects worse than Empire, because obviously Empire has a lot more hard-hitting pieces. I think Empire has a lot of things that are better with it, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. But I think A New Hope goes so underappreciated because it is a brilliant film in its own right, because of that sort of thing where you can look at it however you want and you can see it with any interpretation and get it and love it and whatever. But the way the film just displays itself, it's simple, it's easy to understand, it introduces you into the universe. If anyone's like, oh, I want to start Star Wars, where should I? This one. This one. I would never in a million years go, oh yeah, watch The Phantom Menace.
See, I've got a system for it of how I tell people. People come to me and go, "I would like to watch Star Wars. How do I begin?"
Okay.
I say to them, "Do you know the massive plot twist that is related to Star Wars, which comes in Empire, which, like, currently 100% of people do know.
Mm-hmm.
We all know what it is. One of the biggest plot twists. Can't spoil it, of course, because I say that for Empire.
Yeah,
of
course.
But
yeah, spoiler warning for a film that came out in 1980. By the way,
Yeah.
guys, just FYI.
Just in case you do live under a rock.
Spoiler alert for one of the most famous movie twists of all
Yeah.
time from the 80s.
But yeah, so most people do. But if they go, yes, I do know that. Then I personally say, watch 1, 2, and 3, and then watch 4, 5, and 6.
No, I couldn't because I know it would put people off.
It's story order.
You're right. But I'd say it's in a way you're right, but in a way you're also very wrong. I don't know
because
I don't know. I see what you mean. I think for me it's like if I was to introduce someone to Star Wars, would I don't know. I obviously most people know about that plot twist, but I think it's one of those things where it's like, I don't know. Maybe you're right though. I don't know. In a way,
if I have children, I will sit my child down and I will go, son or daughter, you will watch 4, 5, and 6, and then 1, 2, 3, and then 7, 8, and 9, because that moment in it is beautiful. And if you don't know, if you for some reason didn't know that, then it's absolutely like, I love, because you can find like the reactions from when it first came out.
Yeah,
we'll move on to that. We'll move on now. Empire.
I think there's some fantastic stuff though, because it's great when you see YouTube reactions of people who have never seen it before. Mm-hmm. It's very rare that they haven't seen the twist from Empire, because everyone knows that. But even just watching these films and seeing their reactions to it is so magical. It's like seeing where it started, and I know a bit cheesy, being magical, but it's like, it is in a way, because it's such a famous franchise and it had such humble, small scale, low budget beginnings, you know. And A New Hope really sort of just encapsulates that. And I think we're starting to reference Empire more and more and more.
Before we move on to Empire, we'll have to just mention the music from A New Hope.
Okay.
Just have to mention I don't even know how to, like, it is, some of these sounds, some of the scores that come out of New Hope, they are just Star Wars. They encapsulate Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
Would you not agree? Like,
I think, I totally agree. I think in terms of music, I think it is. And I look like even some of the, like, obviously the Cantina music's famous.
Yes.
I think this is a fantastic starting point, and obviously introduces some of the main themes of the franchise as a whole. I think for me, I don't criticize it, but I praise Empire more for its music, only because I feel like it builds on it more, it makes it iconic. You know, with this film, a lot of the stuff, like the Force theme, isn't the Force theme.
Yeah.
It's Obi-Wan's theme.
Yeah.
And it eventually becomes the Force theme because of the way it's adapted and played with. And I think the music is undeniably brilliant in all of the films. Yeah. John Williams, other than Rise of Skywalker, I think that's absolute. Yeah. I don't understand what happened there, but it's not John Williams' fault. You can see, because there's so much there. I find it weird that there's no prequel music in that.
I hate that they used Duel of Fates in one of the trailers and it didn't appear in the film.
Well, that's the thing. It's a specially composed new version of Duel of Fates, which wasn't ever released. I think that says a lot. And I think there's a thing as well where it's, you kind of have to. There's a fantastic video, actually. I don't know if you've ever seen it. There's a fantastic YouTuber who talks about music. I think it's called Sideways. Mm-hmm. And I definitely recommend watching this. It's a fantastic video where he breaks down the music of Rise of Skywalker and sort of discusses it and sort of explains why it's a total mess in terms of its music, and it's not down to John Williams. I think it's a fantastic thing. We'll talk about that probably when we talk about Rise of Skywalker, because since I've seen the video, I'm so angry about it, and I'm so equally as passionate now, where I'm like, there are hundreds of tracks, they must be, that John Williams has written, composed, that were just never in the film because of certain things. You know, there's weird things. It's like, why is the Emperor's theme playing when the Millennium Falcon is flying away from TIE fighters? The TIE fighters are from the First Order, not the Emperor. The Emperor didn't send them, so why is the Emperor's theme playing? it's like little things like that where like the whole series up until episode 9 has a very strong understanding of it, the fundamentals of the music in Star Wars. And I'm using this sort of criticism of Rise of Skywalker to backpedal onto a fantastic point about the original trilogy, where the music is unparalleled. It's not just brilliant music; it's an understanding of the thematic resonance of the music. It was very contemporary media, that wasn't it?
Very.
But it's understanding what the themes mean for the characters, what the motifs represent, and obviously Empire and Empire does that more, I think. Return just adds a few new things in there, but I think Empire is a fantastic example of that. So yeah, I think we might hop on our first little break, and then when we come back, we're going to be talking about the famous Empire Strikes Back.
Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah.
This is the top rated one, isn't it? I think it's the top rated Star Wars.
It's the one that everyone likes, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
see you all in a minute. Okay, and welcome back. We're now going to talk about Empire Strikes Back. But before we do, there was something during the break that you mentioned to me, and I thought it'd be great to show, great to show on the video version of this. Of course, if you're listening on Spotify, Apple, Google, this might end up being on TikTok. It probably will also be on YouTube, the full version of this podcast. So check it out on my YouTube channel so you can see this little segment here. But there's a fantastic thing you showed me, and I want you to...
So, for Christmas, not last year, but the year before, I got... It's basically a coaster. People who you can't see because of the reflection very well, but it's as a New Hope. But if you zoom in, I'll see if I can. I'll try my torch and see if you can see it. I don't want to blind, but you can kind of make out that it's an original piece of film from the original New Hope, and it's the scene when Obi-Wan or Ben Kenobi, Han Solo, Chewbacca, and Luke are all in the Millennium Falcon, and basically the guy who I got it off had to remortgage his house to buy to buy the original film because basically the business is he buys the films from and puts them in coasters and does the stuff like this. My dad's got a Back to the Future one because obviously that's his favorite film. So the guy had to remortgage his house to buy the New Hope one, or a New Hope one, yeah.
Holy shit!
Yeah.
That's some dedication right there. That's a gorgeous little piece of memorabilia to have. That's fantastic.
I love it. It's my go-to coaster. It's brilliant. Just sits on my desk. It's class.
Your go-to coaster. Oh, I'd be framing it, triple framing it, sticking it on behind a safe wall.
It's just nice to have. It's a nice bit of memorabilia to have.
No, it's fantastic. It's absolutely brilliant. Moving on to the next film in the trilogy, of course, Empire Strikes Back. We touched upon it before. There's a lot to talk about with Empire Strikes Back because everyone says it's the best Star Wars film. I don't think they're wrong. I just think it's a very easy thing to say.
Easy because it's undoubtedly the best Star Wars film. Not easy to say because it's people's go-to.
I feel like if you've never seen it, or if you've never seen any Star Wars film, and someone asks you what your favourite Star Wars film, you could kind of confidently say Empire.
I think it's the best, but it's not my favourite.
Yeah, to be fair, actually, in fairness, I probably should clarify. That's kind of where it stands for me. Is I think it is the best made. It's far from my favourite, though.
Yeah.
What is your favourite, out of curiosity?
Revenge of the Sith.
Same.
Without a doubt, we don't even have to.
It's
There is literally,
but
even for me, it's like Empire isn't. For me, Empire isn't top 3. But there's a difference between favourite and best. Like, I can say something is the best, but just because it's the best doesn't mean it's my favourite. If it was the best, then it would be everyone's favourite. But it's not. Because for me, with a favourite like Revenge of the Sith, a lot more goes into it, which if you listen to the last podcast, I've discussed it.
Yes.
But there's a lot more that goes into Revenge of the Sith, and I have a lot more towards Revenge of the Sith than I do. Empire is still the best. Revenge of the Sith is not the best film.
I think... it's very much not. But I think it's one of those things where as well, there's with Star Wars, and especially Empire as well, I think it is the best. Probably one of the best. But I think it's one of those ones where I think the quality of Star Wars generally is so similar yet different. Similar in the way that, like across all of the films, there's a sort of similar level of quality where it's like, there's some good storytelling beats, there's some bad storytelling beats, there's some great visuals, there's some shit visuals, there's this, that. Empire's the best of that, I'd say. But then it's different in the way where every trilogy is different. You know, the original trilogy is a very classic looking and feeling film trilogy. You go to like the prequels and it's a CGI fest because that's the time of the early 2000s and sci-fi and all that, really pushing the boat out, experimenting. And then you got the sequel trilogy, which is in a way too safe. It looks too good. It looks very modern and very, it's fine, but nothing different and out there and interesting. And I think to compare is very, very difficult. But Empire is probably, it's understandable. When people say it's their favourite, when people say it's the best, it's totally understandable. And it is absolutely deserving of that.
I fully agree. I feel like what you said about all the films have their ups, they have their downs. But Empire definitely has the most ups. Like, it's just renowned. It's just beautiful.
Probably the greatest sequel in cinema history, I'd probably say.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not exactly fighting out Grease 2, but it's it is excellent, and I think it obviously it's famous for its ending and obviously that famous moment on Cloud City.
Yes.
But I think generally as a whole film, I think it is incredible, from the stuff in Hoth and the sort of landscape and the atmosphere that it builds. The music, as we talked about before, I think it builds on the music so well. With, of course, the famous Imperial March, which gets introduced in this film. You've got some fantastic side stories. I love the bits on Dagobah with Yoda. I think those scenes are incredible. Again, pushing the boat out in terms of practical effects, using puppetry and all that sort of thing. They had a bit of that in the first film with like the cantina, but really having Yoda as a main character and someone who's supposed to be a very strong and intellectual Jedi, I think is a very brave move to have him done almost in the same style as Kermit the Frog. But it works, it works, and it is incredible in its own right. The music obviously elevates that. I think this is probably some of the best music. It is the best music, really, from John Williams' Star Wars.
Yeah, it is.
There's some fantastic stuff in the prequels. There's some fantastic stuff in all the other films about Rise of Skywalker. But this is... but
I don't know why you won't say them by name.
No, I can't. I'm not going to go through all of them. God, there's so many. Right, now, for your sake, the music's really good in The Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, Revenge of the Sith, New Hope, Return of the Jedi, Force Awakens, Last Jedi, and of course Empire Strikes Back.
Of course, yeah.
So you just wasted time. That's all I was doing. But yeah, no, I think it does elevate it, and I think it's a huge step up. It is probably the perfect sequel, really. If you're going to make a sequel, you want it to be The Empire Strikes Back. You want it to have that effect where it beautifully builds onto what you've set up in the first film, which already feels like a standalone, independent in a film. This doesn't feel like that. It is definitely a continuation. But again, you can look at it through different lenses. You can look at it as part of a wider franchise. You can look at it as starting some stuff up. Obviously, stuff like Boba Fett, you can look at in terms of his story in the Clone Wars in Episode 2, his story where it goes in The Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett. It has lots of elements that stretch into the further worlds of Star Wars, but it, again, does work very well in its own right as its own thing.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's a beautiful sequel. From the moment the film starts, the stuff on Hoth, it's just the cinematography of it. It's amazing. Mm-hmm. Like even just the way that it's done, and then it has some very, very noticeable moments in it from across all franchises. People strive to have the plot twist that they had. Like, and even again talking about the behind the scenes and stuff to it, the what they went about to keep spoilers. Vader being Luke's father.
We don't need to have a spoiler warning for a film that came out in 1980.
Hey, you never know.
You never know. Some people live under rocks.
Yeah, but just the effort that they went to keep that under wraps, it was unbelievable. Like it really paid off to be able to. It's one of the issues with stuff nowadays is that everything gets leaked. I feel like there are so many films that come out these days that you already know everything that's going to happen. You already know if
Spider-Man No Way Home, for example.
Yes.
Yeah,
but
like you're totally right though. The industry's changed, but also the way it works. I mean, obviously there's social media and there's leaks and stuff, but I think it's amazing how they managed to just keep this under wraps at the time. The fact that they filmed a different ending, originally
they
as well.
They gave everybody different scripts, and everybody knew different things. It's like I think there was maybe 3, 4 people. There was very, 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 very few people knew who. But even then, Star Wars are good at that because it's shown again when in the newest season of Mandalorian. If you've seen the behind the scenes stuff from the last episode of Mandalorian season 2, that wasn't from what I and I'm very active on Star Wars social media and the Star Wars plane. Everyone predicted who it was going to be. People predicted or put predictions out. No one knew it for certain. No one could come out and go, "Oh, yeah, I've got a photo." But it's like they deliberately completely changed the game to. It's something that they do very well is that they don't get stuff leaked, or obviously they sometimes we get stuff leaked and stuff like that. But it was very impressive that they did that, and it really, really, really paid off to have all of that.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. I think it's in terms of hiding that spoiler, in terms of keeping it secret. I think it is brilliant, even for the time. It's but not just for the time, I suppose. I think even for now, it's fantastic, really. Especially when you do look at stuff like No Way Home, which, jokes aside, the film hasn't come out yet. By the time this podcast releases, and by the time we're recording this,
3 weeks.
Yeah. Did you get your tickets?
Yeah. No, not yet. I can't go at midnight because it comes out.
I don't think there are midnight screenings.
Oh, is they not doing it? Oh,
no,
I haven't got anything. We're going to go like the week of it comes out because the day it comes out is the day I go home from uni. So
fair enough. Well, good luck either way. It's absolutely bedlam. It's like Endgame all over again.
I'm gonna say I'm pretty sure I know nearly exactly most of the stuff that happened in the film anyway.
Yeah,
I can probably piece the whole film together by the screenshots that have come out.
And that's the thing, innit? I think there's so much that leaks nowadays from films, and it's amazing because especially with companies like Marvel, who seem to have their own private hitmen. Level of security when it comes to leaking stuff, it seems like a lot of stuff does slip through the gaps, especially with social media and all that sort of thing. So I think this does work not only very well in terms of its delivery in the film, this twist, but I think it works in history because it's so well renowned as at the time no one saw it coming, not even the cast, not even the crew. Like a handful of people knew, and that's just an incredible moment.
Yeah, it's even now thinking about it and watching it genuinely gives me goosebumps.
Yeah,
and it's one of the things that you take from the original trilogy is a lot of the stuff when it gets redone in whether it's shows or other films, it gives me goosebumps or like it makes me emotional. Like that's one thing that I will. Even though, like I said at the start, I don't resonate. The originals are the ones I resonate with the least. Still, stuff like that, like the staples, what basically Star Wars is nearly built around, like the music, the characters, it still gives me like proper goosebumps.
Yeah, absolutely. That moment is always a moment you never want to miss when you're rewatching it. There's certain bits where you can flick open your phone and check your notifications. Or there's certain bits where you can go and get a drink or something. That is, I'm on the edge of my seat. I'm fixated to the screen. It's a phenomenal moment in the film, and it still holds up. It still gives us the effect, the music, the way it's performed, the visuals are sort of striking. You don't get that very often nowadays, not to that level where it's like, oh my god, so simple, but so well done. Thing is, nowadays you'd have people on YouTube videos going, "Hey guys, my prediction, my theory for the new Star Wars film is that Darth Vader is going to be Luke's father," or something like that. I don't know why I said that like Norm Macdonald, but you get the point. God rest his soul. I don't know what I'm doing now. I just get carried away. But it's true nowadays. Even if it was hidden as a spoiler, you have people waffling on and theorizing and all that sort of thing. And there's nothing wrong with theorizing. I do plenty of it. But it's one of those things that...
I love a good theory.
It's so preserved at the time of its release that because that wasn't the culture, that wasn't... You still feel it. Modern films, even with plot twists, I don't think we're going to feel it as much.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of films try to come close to it. I think Endgame has that a little bit. Because I feel like
Endgame.
no one... that was another film when no one really kind of exactly knew where it was going. I feel like, obviously people knew about the time travel stuff, but, spoiler alert, when Tony fucking dies, that's a thing where it's so... I think it's something that people could have predicted, but not in that exact way. The spoiler and the reveal comes in how it's done, not what's done.
Yeah.
And I think that's how modern media has to do it. Whereas back with Empire Strikes Back, what's so effective about it is so simple. He's his dad. That's it.
I think for me, I can't imagine what it would have been like. I am someone who hates... One of my pet hates is people deliberately spoiling stuff for people. Like, I hate it. I had it for Endgame. Endgame was really bad.
Oh.
I'll quickly tell this story. I was in school. I'd booked Endgame tickets for the day it released. I couldn't go midnight because obviously I was in school. Got to focus up.
Oh yeah,
but
good role model.
Of course. But then went to see the Star Wars triple bill. For midnight.
I was going to say we went to see 3 Star Wars films at midnight.
We will quickly move past that. Anyway, so had the tickets moved for like 2 weeks. I was off social media. I was dark on social media for like 4 days leading up to it. I was having nothing spoiled. I was walking out of school, and someone who hadn't even seen the film screams, "Iron Man dies," and my heart just sank. And some of my friends had went to midnight release, and I looked at them in their face. I was like, I can't believe it. And from it was that really stemmed. I can't stand, and I can't imagine what it would have been like to not have been in my situation. Someone going, "Oh yeah, by the way, Darth Vader's Luke's father," and I'd probably just die. It's one of those things that.
But I'm exactly the same. You know about my story with the Last Jedi.
Yeah.
I can't go into too many details about the people involved with it because I don't want to name names. But there was someone who, on the day, I was seeing. Was I seeing it on the release?
You see it with me.
Did we see it on the release date, or was it a couple of days after?
It was the same. No, it was the same situation with Endgame. It came out at the midnight, and we were going to see it
on the day.
On the day.
Yeah, and what happened was someone came into the common room. It was when I was in sixth form. Someone came in the common room. Again, not naming any names, but you know exactly who it is.
I know exactly who it is.
And they were like, "Oh, what are you talking about? Oh, we're talking about Star Wars. I haven't seen it, so we're not spoiling anything." He goes, "Oh, I can't believe that Luke died." I was like, "No, what are you doing?" I said a lot of words at that point, which I'm not going to repeat on this podcast.
I remember seeing you afterwards. And before we went to see the film, and you were...
Yeah, and that was 3 hours after, because this happened at lunchtime, break time even. This was like 3 or 4 hours after that, and I was still fuming. But it wasn't necessarily that. It was when I looked at my mate again, who had been to the midnight release, and his face was just like...
It's that face,
jaw dropped, like, oh God. Because it's like...
That face of why would you do it?
If he was like, it's not, You wait and see the film, you'll see what happens. Then I'll be like, oh, right, okay, that's fine. And then I wouldn't, even if it happened, and I was like, it's a shame I got that spot, I wouldn't be as bothered. But it's the reaction of, oh, God, he's just ruined it. I'm like, no, what? No! I don't... But
it's those just the big moments. It's like, but yeah, good. And that is one of those...
Star Wars has always done it for me, though. The Rise of Skywalker, because we saw it on midnight, is the only one that I haven't had spoiled. Unfortunately, there wasn't really anything to spoil. It was just a bland,
Yeah.
It's like a butter sandwich. Whereas Force Awakens and Last Jedi both got ruined for me. Like Force Awakens by a meme on Facebook of Han Solo being turned into a kebab.
I didn't have Force Awakens. I saw Force Awakens very early. And obviously I wasn't massively into Star Wars, so it wasn't at that time I didn't follow any Twitter accounts or any YouTube channels or
I hated that got spoiled for me, and I think as well it's just one of those things where it made my heart race in the cinema, because when I can see a scene that that's the same, oh god, he's walking onto that
Yeah.
bridge. He's gonna. Oh no. But the thing is, it ruins it because I'm like, I already know it coming. But I think back to the point of like Empire. I think it is a testament of its time that still holds up. I can't remember the first time I watched this, and obviously because I watched the prequels first, it wasn't something that came as much of a shock, I'm sure, but it still has that impact because you know its cultural relevance. That when I watch these films, and I think that's the same thing across the board, not so much with Return of the Jedi, more so with New Hope and Empire. When I watch these films, it's like I'm there. It's like I'm there in like 1980, 1977, watching these films and like, just seeing it. Like, when I watch it, even though I know what's coming, I know what the story is. It's famous, it's been parodied to death. It's been taken apart, but it is something I sit down with, and I'm like, I feel as if I'm there. I feel like I'm watching it for the first ever time, and I love watching a film like that. I love watching a film that has those moments where I can watch Empire, and he goes, "Oh, I'm your father." That's very Geordie Darth Vader, isn't it? But then I'm like, "Oh, that's good. Oh, I feel it. I still feel it." That's the most important thing.
It's one of those things that if I could go back, it would be. I would love to just wait. I'd love to be there and love to be in the cinema with a full cinema when that line is said. Just to see that. I know you can like Google the reactions and stuff, but I just love to be there. Just feel the energy of it.
Yeah, I'd love to feel the energy of the Phantom Menace. Because I feel like that would be equally as entertaining in a very different way. Everyone's so excited going in, and everyone leaves depressed. Before we move on to Return of the Jedi, I want to mention a brilliant character who is, well, I was going to say introduced in this film, but not really, and that's Boba Fett.
I love Boba Fett.
Now, Boba Fett was originally introduced in not Empire, not A New Hope, Star Wars Holiday Special.
Oh god! Oh yeah.
In a little cartoon. See, this is me citing my dissertation right here. This is me properly in the uni mindset here. In the 1978, when they released the Holiday Special, Boba Fett first appeared as a cartoon. What do you think Boba Fett's impact is with Empire, but also Star Wars as a whole? And I wanted to ask this only because not only is he still coming back as one of the biggest and best characters that people and fans alike absolutely adore, but he's also got his own series coming out very shortly, next month, which will be about a month away from this episode release, give or take a few days, and I'm excited for it.
I'm very excited for the series. I feel like when I first watched Star Wars, if you turned to me and gone, "Oh yeah, Boba Fett will at some point in the future have his own TV series about himself," I'd be like, "No, that's not allowed." He's one of those characters that when I originally watched like Empire and Return of the Jedi, he's one of those characters that I wasn't too attached to. However, he's one of the characters who has benefited very well from everything else that's been added onto Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else that has come out from Star Wars, he's for most of it had his foot in the door, and he's had some sort of development, whether that's in the prequels with Jango Fett and obviously the clones and him being in it as a kid, whether that's, we mentioned it again, Clone Wars. He's in Clone Wars. There's a lot of development in Clone Wars.
Do you like Clone Wars?
I absolutely fucking love the Clone Wars. I'm sorry. It is. I will. Yeah. Yes, Clone Wars. Anyway, but even now, like, and it was weird because when Mandalorian first started, obviously we had the first season of Mandalorian. It was a massive success, and then season 2 came around, and there were a lot of casting announcements for season 2. One of them being Boba Fett's actor, or who played the clones and played Django.
It almost wasn't, but it wasn't even announced because I don't even remember.
He was announced to be in it.
Was he?
He was announced to be in it, but
everyone thought he was Commander Rex.
Everyone thought he was going to be Commander Rex.
Of course. Despite the fact that he appears in season 1.
Yes.
Which is mad that I rewatched season 1 before.
I've not rewatched it since I watched it the first time.
Since season 2 started, just before season 2 started, I rewatched season 1. That was last year, and I remember watching it, and I remember being like, I didn't really make the connection that They're on Tatooine, and a mysterious figure walks up to Fennec Shand. And the sound... I don't know if you've watched the Boba Fett documentary.
Oh no, I haven't watched it yet. Actually, I've not watched it.
It's pretty
yet.
good. It's only about 20 minutes, but
Yeah,
they make
yeah.
a fantastic point about it, which I never even realised before. Is the sound or the Foley design that they used for Boba Fett's boots? Despite the fact that he hasn't got anything like metal on them, they made it sound like he's got cowboy boots, where they sort of like jangle a little bit when he sort of walks, and they use the same sound effect in The Mandalorian season 1, and not one person went Boba Fett. It's mad to me. It's mad to me. Talking of The Mandalorian as well, for those viewers at home, I forgot to mention when I started this. Look at this gorgeous Christmas jumper I've got. Beautiful.
I sadly don't have one yet.
Yeah.
I'm looking. We're searching. We're hunting.
It was either that or the Yogscast official Carrot for a Cock one. I went for this, as you can see. Weirdly, the cheaper one. Don't know why, but there you go. But yeah, I think Boba Fett as a character, obviously he's brilliant in this film. I think he is, it's one of those ones because he's a bit shit in a way. Like he's not really in the original trilogy that much.
He's not.
But
he's not.
What's
really.
iconic about him is the design, the style, the mystery around him. Like all of that is so iconic. I mean, the Mandalorians exist because of how successful the Boba Fett design was, and to be able to bring that into, expand that in Clone Wars and bring him back for the Mandalorian in that same, it feels even more impactful. Even though he did barely anything in the original trilogy of any worth, it's amazing to see the character come back and be like, holy shit, it's Boba Fett, he's kicking ass. That episode of the Mandalorian where he's just demolishing stormtroopers is so entertaining. But
I love that they brought him back in Mandalorian, but he wasn't the villain. I love that he was an actual, he was an asset. He was in it. He was proper main character. And he was, obviously he's only in the last few episodes, but and with the ship and everything, they brought everything back for it. They didn't just half-arse it.
Yeah, Slave One, which is of course a fantastic bit of iconography attached to Boba Fett as well. I don't know if that's still the official name of it. I'm not going to get into that. I think it's a bit daft, but So I think Disney wanted to change it from Slave One or something. Yeah, but I call it Slave One. That's the name of the ship. It's been that for 40 years. I'm going to stick with that.
It's a great ship as well.
Yeah, a gorgeous, again, a fantastic piece of iconography when it comes to that sort of stuff. As is generally like Cloud City and the whole aesthetic of this film, really. But yeah, do you have any sort of summarised thoughts on Empire before we sort of shift on to our final break before talking about Return of the Jedi?
Great film, banging plot twist. What else is there to say?
Yeah, great film.
It has some, but just before we move on, Empire introduces some great characters like Lando.
Mm-hmm. Of course, Lando's excellent.
Yeah, excellent character, and again did very well from the stuff that they added on to him later on.
Yeah,
in Return, and then obviously the solo film and stuff like that. But
and obviously we're getting a Lando series as well now.
Yeah, we get a series as well.
I'm still waiting for the Disney Plus series for the giant penis worm thing that we see in this film. Still waiting for that. It's not going to happen.
Still waiting for it.
I reckon it'll be at least a couple of years. And then maybe Kathleen will pull her finger out and give the fans what they want.
Maybe.
I've just realised as well, before we shift on, this is very unprofessional of me, but I just realised we went through New Hope without even talking about the hand shot first or McClunky stuff.
True. We didn't mention all the different Greedo voice lines, did we? Every single different iteration of Greedo.
Could you summarise in one word how you feel about that entire controversy and interaction between? I feel like I know what the word's going to be.
In one word.
In one word.
It's just shit. There's literally no reason. There was no actual point. There is no point in changing what Greedo says.
Do you not like,
for some reason?
Do you not like the way that Han jolts his head?
Do
you not like that?
So bad.
Does that not look natural to you? Can you not do that?
My issue isn't with the. My issue isn't with the scene. It's the fact that every single version of A New Hope that gets released, Greedo has a different voice line. They did it for Disney Plus. Disney Plus's version of A New Hope has a different voice line from every other version. Yeah,
McClunky, innit? Now,
why? There's no point.
It's fascinating though. I don't understand it myself, but I love it.
Don't get me wrong. It's so funny. It's like but I love it because it's like a meme thing. It's the reason
I'm sure it was referenced.
It's the reason I love the prequels. Because
it's the same sort of thing, from it? Yeah. Did they reference McClunky in something recently, like Mando or something? I'm sure it was referenced.
I'll have to Google that. I'm pretty sure they might have done it in Mando, actually.
I think that rings a bell. That feels familiar.
Yeah,
I feel
I'll
like
Google
Dave
it.
Filoni probably did something like that recently. Anyway, though, enough McClunky talk. We're going to go on another little break before we eventually return and talk about the final film in the original trilogy, Return of the Jedi, and the introduction of one of my favourite actors in the Star Wars saga. That's the Emperor. just in case you didn't get that. Right.
Just in case.
See you all in a minute. And welcome back to the third part of our Star Wars Original Trilogy review podcast episode. I don't know why I spaced all those words out, but it's fun, isn't it? Keeps the runtime going up. Return of the Jedi is the final film of this trilogy. And I think it's one of those ones where I don't know if we agree on this one. So I want to ask you what you think about Return of the Jedi before I bombard you with my opinion.
I think that it is the weakest out of the three originals. However, probably my favourite, I think. I would say probably. Because I don't know.
Probably your favourite?
Favourite out of the originals.
Is your favourite out of the original trilogy?
Yes.
Okay.
But
No.
Because
that's fine. That just took me out. That was very out of nowhere. I wasn't expecting you to say that. Not a bad thing. That baffled me a little bit.
I don't know why, but I don't. It's hard to explain. Obviously, I actually don't know. I just feel like, it's just good. Yeah.
For me, I think for me,
I think it's definitely the weakest.
Yeah. I think for me, it's the perfect crux in a Star Wars ranking. I think it's right in the middle. I think once you get to Return of the Jedi, you know you're flipping in quality. So if you're doing a list from worst to best, you know that when you get to Return of the Jedi, they're going to be good from here on in.
Yeah.
If you're going from best to worst, when you get to Return of the Jedi, you go, right, now the shit ones. So it's kind of in the middle where it's like, it's not that good, but it is good as well. It has a lot going for it. I think the opening at Jabba's Palace is very, very iconic. I think that has its own cultural, following in itself, I suppose, that entire scene and iconography. The one thing I don't like about that sequence is, of course, Boba Fett just getting killed off. I can't believe I actually said that. I can't believe I actually said that.
We can now officially say killed off.
I'm an idiot. He wasn't killed off, but he
rule
was...
number one of Star Wars is if a character isn't killed on screen, they're not dead. We've learned this.
But I think, so he's supposedly dead at the time, and let's say that is his death. That was a terrible death.
Oh, yeah, it's awful. It's absolutely dreadful.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things... Yeah, I think that really takes away from that entire sequence. But the rest of the sequence is pretty good, other than Leia being put in a very unfortunate outfit. There's just no need, really, is there?
No.
But I suppose that's Jabba, or was it George Lucas? Who knows?
Or both.
Both. Could be. Both. Repulsive giant space monster slug man. Who knows what I'm talking about? It is what it is. Yoda disappears.
Yeah.
That happens.
Yeah.
And we get confirmed that there's another Skywalker. Another Luke's sister, of course, who gets brought up in this film. We didn't even talk about the kiss in Empire. And
I completely forgot about this.
Yeah, let's not. Yeah. I think we'll leave it there. I think the film, it in a weird way starts out very similar to Empire, which is my first sort of drawaway, is that it feels like a mix of Empire and A New Hope, opposed to it being something wholly original.
Yeah.
It feels like Empire in terms of its, well, especially in terms of its opening, big bombastic opening on a planet of undisclosed origin before everyone else ventures off to do their own thing, and Luke goes to Dagobah. And then it sort of flips halfway through to, like, the Endor stuff. So then that's a little bit more like A New Hope, especially with the ending, with the Death Star run. It's basically the same thing. It's still on a Death Star. It's still blowing it up. The only key difference, the big, stray away from what we're used to with the other Star Wars films in this trilogy, is my favourite character, and that is the Emperor, who was obviously introduced in Episode 5 as a little hologram person, who is now Ian McDiarmid, but it wasn't at the time. This is Ian McDiarmid's first ever portrayal of the Emperor in this film, and yeah, he's introduced into this, and he's the big sort of crux of it. He's the best bit of the film for me, not just him, but the scenes surrounding him, the music surrounding him. All of that sort of stuff, I think, is pretty bloody good. In terms of the Emperor, I'm going to specifically ask you, thoughts?
I think it's just brilliant. Like, it's amazing character. I think he's a perfect introduction in this film. It's kind of like that. It's like, how do you take Darth Vader, who is kind of meant to be this overarching bad guy, and somehow make an even more evil overarching bad guy? And that's just the Emperor. But the introduction of the Emperor isn't just great in this film. It creates so much more for the rest of the franchise. One of the best characters in the prequels is Senator or Palpatine or whatever you call him. Like, he's just and even just the portrayal of the character and the way the character's written. This old, decrepit Sith Lord. He doesn't move. Like, he literally sits in a chair the entire time. But there's something about the presence.
That's it, though, isn't it? For me, there's something. The one thing I love in film and TV is some evil old man. That or woman, But most of my examples come from evil old men, like like Palpatine or well, less evil but calculated and important, I suppose, Robert Ford from Westworld. Characters like that really just strike me immediately. And with the Emperor, not only is it an old man who sort of knows more than it, like sort of all-knowing kind of thing, he's ahead of everyone, but he's also all-powerful. And he's also having a lot of fun. And I like that. The way he cackles and takes the piss, I think that's the bit I like the most about the Emperor. And he does that in this. Obviously, that's expanded more in the prequels, which obviously we've already talked about. But this film introduces him, and the scenes with him, between him and Luke, and also the fight between Luke and Vader in his presence, I think is brilliant. We'll talk about the fight specifically now, but on just a side mention, even, again, with the Emperor, him sitting there cackling all the way through the fight, like some sort of shit Sky Sports presenter or something. Just waffling on in the background. It's brilliant, though. I think that fight is probably my favourite, or second favourite, of the original trilogy. I thought, obviously, like, the Cloud City fight is probably the best, isn't it? I mean, the lightsaber fight, But I think with this, it is actually really good as well, and I think it does get underlooked because of how good Empire is. I think this has a really brilliant aesthetic to it, because it's Luke actually almost besting Vader in a lot of cases, but there's that rage in there. There's that balance between, is he going to be good, is he going to be bad, like what is he going to channel, and Vader taunting him, eventually leading to Luke cutting his hand off. That whole sequence is excellent, for me anyway.
I would agree. Everything in Palpatine's kind of throne room is just beautiful. Like, even down to the whole sets. The sets are gorgeous. Like, just being that they're in the Death Star, aren't they? The Death Star 2.
Yeah.
It's been a long time since I watched it. Yeah, so even just double checking, they're in the Death Star 2, and even like that entire the area being able to, the glass window behind them, it's all gorgeous. And even the guards, like down to the introduction of the Royal Guards in the red, they're stunning aesthetically.
Yeah,
they match the presence that that presence that when you see Palpatine and you hear him, he has this, whether it's the young version, whether it's the Rise of Skywalker version, they all still have that kind of, that it is a Sith Lord, like it is the Sith Lord presence.
You feel that, like, obviously Vader's the intimidating one through all of these films, but when he arrives, the Emperor, it's like, okay, well, Vader is obviously still scary, he's still, like, very impactful, but you can tell the Emperor's the boss here. And the fact that someone can immediately walk on the scene and you're like, ooh, okay, I wouldn't mess with this guy. Like, Vader you wouldn't mess with, but the Emperor, oh, that's a no-go. You just couldn't, even if you wanted to. You couldn't even think about messing with him, because you'd already know.
The Emperor's just a different breed, because all the other Sith Lords that we see...
the Emperor is simply built different.
But do you know, to put it in simple terms, he is built different, because all the other Sith Lords that we see, they're all about revenge and all about this kind of this murderous intent. Whereas the Emperor just goes about it completely different. He is like no other Sith Lord, where he just wants to intimidate.
Yeah.
And he wants to make Luke bring out this the fear and the darkness that's inside of him. Like, he goes about it in no way that Vader doesn't go about it. And I still think to this day, all the Sith Lords that we've seen, none of them have that. I don't know how to phrase it. None of them have that kind of that power that Palpatine has, the power of persuasion.
Yeah, it's and that's it, isn't it? And that, obviously, the prequel trilogy is Palpatine's backstory, how he manipulated his way into the most powerful force in the whole galaxy.
Yeah.
This is less of a role, but it's important to have him here, especially in sort of wider context of Star Wars as a story. I do think, however, where this film kind of falls apart, because these scenes are fantastic, and we have done a lot of praising in these films, but where this film falls apart for me is just Endor. I can't stand it. Honestly, it is genuinely so dull. I really don't like it. Like, I get it. Okay, when I was a kid, I got it. It's fine. But as someone who wants to be critical, I get what they're doing, but it just doesn't work for me as much. Maybe it's me and I don't like the sort of forest aesthetic. Maybe I really like the sci-fi vibe of all the other films. Even stuff like Tatooine has a sort of grungy, Mad Maxy style sci-fi aspect to it. Whereas Endor, you don't really get that. And I think the Ewoks as characters just aren't too compelling. You've got stuff like the Tusken Raiders. You've got stuff like the what's the beast thing called from Hoth?
Oh God,
Wampa beast or something?
Yeah, I think it is.
I can be totally wrong, but then Endor has like
the Ewoks.
Warwick Davis in a bear costume.
When you put it that way.
No, I know, it's horrible, but it's true. And I look, I like it. I don't not like, certain aspects of it. I'm not like so against it. It's in keeping with the rest of the trilogy. In fairness, it doesn't feel like it's venturing too far out and it's too over the top. But I think, as a lot of people have said before, I'm definitely not the first person to make this point, but it is very clearly in this one about that merchandising push. Yeah. Oh, little fluffy bears, great. So now they can get an animated movie out of it, which they did. Now they can get toys out of it. It's less of making it for the art and making it for the story, and more of making it for a little bit extra on the side. And I know it's a nice thing in certain aspects, but I can't get behind it. And I think that's what really kills this film for me, is the stuff with the Emperor, the stuff with Vader, the stuff with Luke, the themes and the stakes and the story and the characters are incredibly done. And the opening is brilliant, despite the Boba Fett thing. This film really falls apart for me on the Forest Moon of Endor. And I cannot... I don't know why, specifically. I think it probably is to do with the Ewoks, but I just think it is just totally the opposite of engaging. If Empire Strikes Back is sort of a thrill ride where they're on the sort of tail end and everything's going wrong and they're just managing to scrape survival, Empire, Return of the Jedi, just kind of, it's like, oh, they're on a planet of teddy bears. Okay. Like, at the end of Empire, I felt like the rebels had nothing left. It's a little bit in a way like the jump between Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker, nowhere near as bad, but with that it's like, oh right, the rebels are at their wits end. They haven't got much left, and then in Rise of Skywalker they've got this huge base again. Cool.
See, it's different for me because I actually quite like Endor as a planet. I like the
as an
I like the
aesthetic.
forest.
Yeah.
Yeah, as an aesthetic, I like the forest aspect to it. I think it's quite a nice difference, and it gives us something else. Because obviously we've seen like the ice, the snow, the sand. It's something different. And even the Ewoks, it might be purely because I liked it as a kid, and it's like a nostalgia thing. But the stuff on Endor doesn't annoy me. It's, again, I'm not saying that it's the best thing ever. It's definitely not, and it is definitely what lets the film down. But it doesn't annoy me. Like when I sit and watch it, I still enjoy all the stuff on Endor. I do quite enjoy the Ewoks because I
that's the
quite
thing
like
for me.
the
I
little...
zone out.
Yeah, so I still quite enjoy watching it. Like, it doesn't let the film down. It doesn't completely take my attention away. I do.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things for me where I look at it as a concept, and I know I'm just, it's pointless me giving, I do it like this, because it's a totally different scenario, with whatever. But I think it's like, with a forest thing, you could do so much better than sort of like small bear type characters who come across friendly, who are like tribesmen. I like the idea of the tribesman aspect. Why not have like beasts and stuff, like other things hiding in the forest that you can use? You had the speed bikes. Why not have some sort of giant insect type creature that could fly or something? Like stuff like that would have really made it like, oh, here's the Empire with all their arsenal versus this race of indigenous people and the rebels, opposed to it being, here's the Empire and all their might versus a bunch of rebels and some teddy bears, and the teddy bears win. I don't know. I don't know about that.
The teddy bears take down big four-legged robot.
Like I see, I hate I'm using the excuse that everyone does when they're talking about this film. It's such a typical thing of, Attack of the Teddy Bears. Some of it works and some of it is engaging, but I can't deny that I'm taken out of it, and it's such a shame because I feel like Cloud City is this advanced civilization where the finale of the film takes place, and then in episode 4 you don't really get that, but you get the Death Star, you get Tatooine with the Tusken Raiders. I feel like in terms of all Star Wars mythology, the Forest Moon of Endor, in terms of its like race of Ewoks and other stuff, it doesn't expand it as much as I'd expect. It's the third film of the trilogy. They probably had a little bit more leeway in what they could do. Like, be adventurous. You could do speeder bikes, get some flying giant insects or something, or like just some like more more adult imagery, not like adult imagery. I'm not talking to like a giant cock hanging out, but like something a bit more gritty. And I mean, I don't want to like blood and guts, but not, teddy bears is like the very other end of it. I think teddy bears, but Ewoks is like one very extreme end of it. Whereas the Tusken Raiders, like, they didn't feel like childish; they felt genuinely intimidating. And the creatures and stuff that were introduced in Empire, same thing there. I feel it's just the one thing where I'm like, the creatures that are going to go against the Empire are the ones that feel the least intimidating, and they win. It doesn't feel as right, but it's a very minor thing. It just takes me out of it a bit, and I think it's the first time and the only time in this entire original trilogy where I'm like, I don't really like this as much. It is what it is.
I definitely don't like it as much, but it still has my attention because I do still like the stuff that takes place. It is gimmicky at times. But again, I think that's my inner child coming out, that I do quite like the gimmick. The gimmick. Oh my god, like the stupidness of it. I'll change the words. Yeah, like Yeah,
I get what you mean. I think it is one of those things. But for me, overall, as a film, Return of the Jedi does work. I think it has a lot going for it. I think one of my favourite moments, which I would like to just sort of reference now, because I think I prefer this to a lot of moments in any of the other Star Wars films, in terms of music, in terms of character, in terms of dialogue, in terms of just the whole aesthetic of this scene. It is one of the most beautiful and one of the most underrated scenes in Star Wars history that never gets talked about, and it is the conversation between Luke and Leia on Endor.
At the end?
No, when Luke's leaving to hand himself over to Vader.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And this fantastic piece of music plays called Luke and Leia, and it's the piece of music which is probably one of my favourites in Star Wars history, and it's very, very rarely used. It's never used in the prequels, I don't think, and it's used in The Last Jedi when Luke and Leia reunite very briefly towards the end of that film. And it's a very impactful piece of music. It's a very beautiful piece of music. It has a perfect connection between those two characters. But then the emotional performance and the understanding that Leia is his sister, and that sort of it's fascinating, and I think it's so it's so beautifully done, and the nighttime scenery of Endor with the huts and stuff, I think looks gorgeous. I think that entire scene is so underrated, and I could just watch that on repeat for so long. In terms of this whole film, despite the stuff I love about the Emperor and all that sort of thing, one of my favourite moments of this entire original trilogy comes down to that scene, that very human interaction between these two characters, and the music and how emotional and fantastic it feels. Because you don't really get a super like easy reunion between Luke and Leia at the end of the film. It's like the party, but this is the moment for me between them two where that is their definitive. If I wanted to show a perfect example of the relationship between those two characters, that would be the scene I'd choose. On the topic of that, we've sort of talked about all three of these films now. I want to kind of sum this up with: do you have a favourite scene in terms of character, in terms of dialogue, in terms of music, in terms of imagery, whatever you want? Do you have a particular favourite scene out of all these films? That I will say as well, I will push for a one maybe that isn't conventional, maybe one that we haven't talked about today, or maybe one that we don't think like. So I'm not looking for like the reveal at the end of the Empire.
I'll give you both. I'll give you the more not really as
okay.
I mean, it is still quite popular with a famous quote and stuff, and there is one that is very popular and very famous. So the not so popular, not so well, it is still quite famous. The famous line is when when it's Luke, Vader, and the Emperor in the Emperor's throne room, and the Emperor tells him that he wants him to strike him down, and he gives him all the dialogue about how he needs to come over to the dark side and needs to pursue that. I feel like it's and especially with Luke's outfit change and the more black in Return of the Jedi, they're really hardened in on this symbolism, and it is kind of like the start of maybe Jedi isn't the fully right way. Maybe you can be both, but obviously it's not as fleshed out as it is later on. But it's kind of like that starting point, and those lines. It goes back to the persuasiveness of the Emperor and how some of the lines that he says during it are quite like, maybe this is the right way. Maybe there isn't a definitive right way. That would be my non-conventional one. My conventional one, very famous, is from A New Hope with twin sons.
Well, that's beautiful though. We haven't even mentioned that, to be fair. So that's a very good show.
It's absolutely stunning. Music, symbolism, it's beautiful. Anytime they show any kind of twin sons, it's always beautiful. Whenever they play the music at the end of season 2 Mandalorian, when Luke's revealed and they play that music, I was actually in tears. Like I was in my girlfriend's living room crying because it was like, it was the one thing that I wanted, and it goes back to what I said before about how like it does, despite me not having too much to do with the originals, it still does hit hard. It still does give me those goosebumps, and it was I don't know, it just made me quite emotional hearing it. But that would be my quite famous one, because Twin Sons is just
brilliant.
It's brilliant. Yeah, it's literally, it's absolutely stunning.
It's a phenomenal scene, and honestly, a very good note to end this podcast on, I think. Do you have any sort of links and all that sort of thing, socials, anything you want to promote? Now's the space to do that.
Cooper_Britton on Twitter. You'll find me. Reply to a lot of your tweets. There's a lot of shit posts from me. But yeah, that's really it. But yeah, so.
No worries. You can check that out in the you can check the link to that below. What am I even fucking saying? You can check the link to that below this podcast episode. So do check that out. And of course, if you want to follow us on Twitter, it is @SpillYourBeans, and on Instagram, it's @SpillYourBeansPodcast. Because someone took the name. And of course, if you want to follow my personal accounts on Twitter and Instagram, it is @GBSheard. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you all next week with what I believe is our final episode of Season 2 for the podcast. So, see you all. See you all later. Bye-bye.